Admiral Saracen stood before the massive viewport of the U.S. Retribution, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger as her fleet approached home. 300 years. 3 centuries since the Galactic Consortium had descended upon their world with promises of peace and partnership, only to reveal their true intentions when humanity was already trapped in their web of deceit. The memories still burned in her chest like molten metal. Her ancestors had welcomed the aliens with open arms, eager to join a vast community of intelligent species. Instead, they found themselves classified as a Category 7 labor species, sentient enough to follow complex instructions, but supposedly lacking the higher cognitive functions that would grant them rights under galactic law. "Admiral," came the voice of Commander Marcus Webb from behind her. "The Council is assembled and ready for your address." Sarah turned away from Earth, her reflection ghosting across the reinforced glass. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the scared child who had been torn from her family's farm on Europa and shipped to the mining colonies of Kepler 442b. That girl had died in the sulfur pits, replaced by something harder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. "Patch me through to all vessels," she commanded, walking toward the bridge's central platform. The holographic displays flickered to life around her, showing the faces of ship captains, resistance leaders, and liberated humans from across the galaxy. Some bore the ritual scars of the Vorthan combat pits. Others showed the pale complexion of those who had spent decades in the underground factories of Rigel 7. All carried the same expression, a mixture of grief, rage, and cold determination. "Brothers and sisters," Sarah began, her voice carrying across hundreds of ships and millions of souls. "Today marks exactly 57 years since we began our exodus from bondage. 57 years since we started gathering our strength, stealing their technology, learning their weaknesses." She paused, letting the weight of those decades settle over her audience. Every person listening had sacrificed something for this moment. Friends, family, pieces of their humanity traded away in service of a larger goal. "They thought they knew us," she continued. "The Zephyrians believed we were simple beasts, useful only for their pleasure gardens. The hegemony saw nothing but expendable soldiers for their endless territorial wars. The Syndicate valued us only for our capacity to work in environments that would kill their own kind." The displays showed nods of recognition, scarred faces hardening at the memories. But they made a critical error. They assumed that because we were enslaved, we were broken. They forgot that humans are not just another species. We are the universe's greatest survivors. We adapt, we endure, and most importantly, we remember. Sarah's hand moved to the data tablet at her side, calling up intelligence reports that had taken decades to compile. Every species in the consortium participated in our enslavement. The crystalline hegemony purchased over 40 million humans for their deep space mining operations. The Vorthan Empire claimed 30 million as gladiators and entertainment. The Syndicate of Worlds acquired nearly 60 million for hazardous industrial work. The numbers rolled on, each figure representing countless lives destroyed, families torn apart, children who never knew freedom. But they also represented something else, proof of humanity's worth. No species in galactic history had been exploited on such a massive scale, because no other species had proven capable of surviving it. "The Accord suppression was signed by every major power," Sarah continued, her voice growing colder. 147 separate civilizations agreed that humanity should never be allowed technological advancement. They share our location, our weaknesses, our psychological profiles. They collaborated to ensure our bondage would be permanent. She gestured, and the displays shifted to show images of alien dignitaries, the very beings who had orchestrated humanity's suffering. Some were long dead, but their governments, their institutions, their cultures remained. Today, we return to Earth not as refugees or victims, but as harbingers of justice. For 3 centuries, they profited from our pain. They built their golden ages on our backs, their prosperity from our blood. They thought us animals, but they created something far more dangerous. They forged us into the perfect weapon for their own destruction. The fleet had reached Earth's outer system now, and Sarah could see the massive defensive platforms the Consortium had built around their former prison. Automated weapon systems designed to prevent exactly what was now happening. Humanity's return. "Look around you," she said, spreading her arms to encompass the vast armada. Every ship in this fleet was built with stolen technology. Every weapon system was reverse engineered from our captors' own designs. Every strategic advantage we hold was purchased with decades of silent observation and careful preparation. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, final preparations for what was to come. Sarah watched her weapons officer, a woman who had spent 20 years as a technical slave in the syndicate's shipyards, preparing to turn her former master's creations against them. "They wanted to use our adaptability," Sarah said, her voice now carrying across the entire fleet. "They wanted our resilience. They wanted our ability to survive in hostile environments, to work with primitive tools, to endure hardships that would break other species." She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. They got exactly what they asked for. But now they're going to learn what happens when you take the galaxy's most dangerous species and give them 300 years to plan their revenge. The first phase was about to begin. The consortium's early warning systems began screaming alerts across 17 different star systems simultaneously. For the first time in galactic history, every major power received the same message at exactly the same moment, broadcast on frequencies that should have been impossible for humans to access. Fleet Admiral Zethkar of the crystalline hegemony was in his meditation chambers when the communication array burst to life. The crystalline being's internal light patterns shifted to deep crimson as he absorbed the impossible readings. Humans, millions of them, were moving through hyperspace with technology that rivaled or exceeded anything in the consortium's arsenal. Impossible, he resonated through the ship's crystal matrix. They lacked the cognitive capacity for such coordination, but the evidence was undeniable. Humanity had not only escaped their carefully constructed prison, they had turned it into a staging ground for something unprecedented. On the bridge of the U.S. Retribution, Sarah watched as her communications officer established quantum entanglement links with resistance cells that had been dormant for decades. Across the galaxy, humans who had spent their entire lives pretending to be broken slaves were suddenly revealing capabilities their masters never knew existed. "Phase 1 is active," reported Commander Webb. "All cells are responding on schedule." Sarah nodded, her attention focused on the tactical displays surrounding her. Each point of light represented years of planning, sacrifice, and careful positioning. The consortium had unknowingly distributed humanity's greatest strategic asset, their own people, across every critical system in known space. Sir Reginald, she called her chief engineer, a man whose refined British accent seemed almost comical given the circumstances. In truth, he had been born in the slave quarters of a syndicate industrial complex, but had spent 40 years maintaining the pretense of being a simple maintenance worker while secretly memorizing every technical specification that passed through his hands. "The Kronos array is fully operational, Admiral," he reported with understated pride. "We can maintain real-time communication with any resistance cell within 50,000 light-years. The Kronos array, humanity's greatest secret weapon, built over 5 decades using components requisitioned from dozens of different alien technologies, it represented something the galaxy had never seen. A species-wide communication network that could coordinate actions across impossible distances without delay. "Initiate contact with the hegemony mining operations," Sarah ordered. The main display shifted to show the crystal caves of Altair Prime, where over 2 million humans had toiled for generations extracting rare minerals. To their crystalline overseers, they were nothing more than efficient biological mining equipment. But as Sarah watched, that perception was about to change dramatically. Deep in the mines, a human named David Kim received Sarah's signal through a neural implant that had been carefully hidden from his captors for 30 years. Around him, thousands of other slaves suddenly straightened, their eyes losing the glazed look of defeated servitude that had fooled their masters for so long. "Brothers and sisters," David spoke quietly into his hidden transmitter, "it is time." What happened next took exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The humans didn't fight their crystalline overseers. They simply stopped pretending to be as stupid as their captors believed. Maintenance workers revealed intimate knowledge of the facility's most critical systems. Miners demonstrated that they had been secretly mapping every tunnel and weak point for decades. Transport operators showed that they understood the complex logistics networks better than their supervisors. The crystalline hegemony's most productive mining operation didn't collapse. It was methodically and efficiently taken over by the very slaves who had built it. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On Vorthan combat worlds, human gladiators who had been forced to fight for entertainment suddenly demonstrated tactical abilities that their warrior captors had never suspected. Industrial slaves in syndicate factories revealed that they had been intentionally introducing subtle flaws into critical systems for decades, creating vulnerabilities that could now be exploited. Admiral, her intelligence officer reported, were receiving confirmations from 93% of primary targets. Resistance cells are securing strategic assets faster than projected. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy's various species had always assumed that humans were successful slaves because they were naturally submissive. They had never considered the alternative, that humans were successful slaves because they were naturally gifted at deception. "Open a channel to Consortium High Council," she commanded. The main display flickered, showing the emergency session that was currently taking place on the neutral station of Nexus Prime. Representatives from every major power were present, their various forms of agitation clearly visible as reports flooded in from across their territories. "Honored members of the Galactic Consortium," Sarah began, her image appearing on their central display without any trace of submission they expected from humans. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Forces. I bring greetings from the human species, your former property." The reaction was immediate and predictable. Vorthan warriors roared challenges. Syndicate diplomats demanded to know how humans had acquired military technology. Crystalline hegemony representatives pulsed with patterns of outrage and disbelief. "You have violated the Accord suppression," declared High Counselor Vextai of the Syndicate, his metallic voice carrying harmonic authority that had once made humans cower. "Return to your designated servitude zones immediately, and your punishment will be limited to standard reconditioning." Sarah's laugh was cold and sharp. "Counselor Vextai, I don't think you understand your situation. We're not here to negotiate our freedom. We earned that through 3 centuries of careful planning. We're here to discuss the terms of your surrender." The council chamber erupted in what could only be described as alien laughter. The concept of humans making demands was so absurd to them that several species couldn't process it as a serious statement. "You are 3 billion primitives with stolen technology," growled war leader Thurek of the Vorthan Empire. "We are the combined might of 147 civilizations. You'll be returned to your cages within a standard month." 3 billion. Sarah repeated, her smile growing wider. "Counselor, I think your intelligence services need updating. Current human population across all occupied territories is approximately 47 billion, 400 million souls. And every single one of them just remembered that they're not actually your property." The silence that followed was profound. For the first time, the true scope of what they were facing began to dawn on the Consortium's leadership. They had spread humanity across the galaxy so thoroughly that there was no longer anywhere humans could not reach. "Phase 2 commences in 6 hours, Sarah announced. "I suggest you use that time wisely." The Consortium's response was swift and predictable. Within 3 hours of Sarah's ultimatum, massive military fleets began converging on human-occupied territories from across the galaxy. The Vorthan Empire dispatched their legendary Dreadnought Corps. The crystalline hegemony activated their planet killer weapons. The Syndicate of Worlds mobilized their automated war fleets that had conquered dozens of species. Admiral Chen watched the tactical displays with calm satisfaction as enemy forces moved into positions that had been anticipated decades ago. Every predictive response was unfolding exactly as humanity's greatest strategic minds had calculated during years of careful observation and planning. "They're really going to do it," Commander Webb observed, studying the readings. "They're actually preparing to use planetary bombardment weapons against their own infrastructure." "Of course they are," Sarah replied. "They can't conceive of humans as anything other than replaceable resources. They assume they can simply kill this generation and breed new slaves from the survivors." The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency as the first consortium forces entered weapons range of human-held positions. These men and women represented something unique in galactic history. A command structure composed entirely of former slaves who had spent lifetimes studying their captors' military doctrine while pretending to be ignorant. Sir Reginald, Sarah called her chief engineer, initiate Pandora Protocol. With pleasure, Admiral, came the culture reply. Across 17 star systems, humans who had spent decades maintaining alien technology suddenly revealed modifications that their masters had never noticed. Crystalline hegemony warships found their power matrices destabilizing as maintenance slaves activated hidden feedback loops. Vorthan Empire vessels discovered that their weapon systems contained subtle programming alterations that turned their own firepower against them. Syndicate automated fleets began receiving conflicting orders from control systems that had been quietly compromised over generations. The effect was devastating and immediate. The consortium's overwhelming technological advantage evaporated as their own weapons became unreliable, their ships suffered cascading system failures, and their communication networks began carrying human signals instead of their own commands. But the real masterstroke was yet to come. Admiral, her communications officer reported, "We're receiving the expected surrender signals from Hegemony Mining Station Omega-7. Sarah smiled grimly. Station Omega-7 was a crystalline hegemony's most heavily defended installation, a fortress that protected their primary antimatter production facility. Its surrender wasn't unexpected. It was planned. "Open a channel to High Counselor Vex Tai," she commanded. The syndicate leader's metallic features appeared on screen, his harmonics now carrying undertones of confusion and growing fear. Behind him, Sarah could see other consortium representatives in heated discussion as reports continued flooding in. Admiral Chun, Vex Tai began, his voice struggling to maintain its previous authority. "We are prepared to discuss modifications to current labor arrangements, perhaps expanded privileges, improved living conditions." "Counselor," Sarah interrupted, "I don't think you're grasping the situation. This isn't a labor dispute. This is a war crimes tribunal." She gestured, and the display shifted to show footage that had been secretly recorded over centuries of enslavement. Images of human children torn from their families. Documentation of medical experiments performed on conscious subjects. Records of entire populations worked to death in hazardous environments while their captors profited. For 300 years, every species and consortium participated in or profited from crimes against humanity. You didn't just enslave us. You industrialized our suffering. You turned torture into an economic system and genocide into standard operating procedure. The alien faces on screen showed varying degrees of discomfort, but Sarah wasn't finished. The Vorthan Empire forced human children to fight to the death for entertainment while betting on the outcomes. The crystalline hegemony conducted consciousness transfer experiments, trying to discover if they could upload human minds into crystal matrices for permanent enslavement. The syndicate perfected techniques for extending human lifespans specifically so we would suffer longer in their factories. Each accusation was supported by documentation that had been carefully gathered and preserved by resistance networks. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and utterly damning. "These are regrettable necessities of efficient resource management," stammered High Counselor Vex Tai, but his harmonics betrayed his growing desperation. "Resource management," Sarah repeated flatly. "Is that what you call the systematic extermination of human culture, the forced breeding programs, the deliberate destruction of our historical records?" She paused, allowing the weight of centuries to settle over the communication channel. "But here's what you never understood about humans, Counselor. We don't just survive, we learn. Every atrocity you committed taught us something about your species. Every cruelty revealed your weaknesses. Every act of oppression showed us exactly how to defeat you." The tactical displays around Sarah's bridge showed the true scope of human preparation. Secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields. Weapons caches established in the deepest parts of alien worlds. Communication networks that spanned the galaxy, connecting every human who had ever pretended to be broken while planning revenge. "You wanted us to be your perfect slaves," Sarah continued, her voice growing colder. "You succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. We became so good at serving you that you never noticed we were also learning to replace you. Commander Webb approached with a status report. Admiral, all primary objectives are secured. We have control of 73% of critical infrastructure across consortium space. Enemy military forces are operating at less than 30% effectiveness due to systemic failures. Sarah nodded, then returned her attention to the Alien Council. You have 24 hours to begin evacuation of human-controlled territories, she announced. Any consortium forces that remain after that deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. You cannot be serious, growled War Leader Thurk of the Vorthan Empire. We will not abandon our sovereign territories to escape livestock. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her next words carried the weight of absolute certainty. War Leader Thurk, your empire currently has approximately 4 million humans working in what you consider critical defense installations. As of 6 minutes ago, every single one of them stopped pretending to be loyal to you. I estimate your military will experience complete systemic collapse within 48 hours. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of urgent communications being relayed throughout the Consortium Council chamber. 24 hours, Sarah repeated. Use them wisely. The Consortium's final gambit came at the 18-hour mark. Unable to accept that their former slaves had outmaneuvered them completely, the allied alien species made a desperate decision that revealed the true depths of their arrogance and cruelty. Admiral, the communications officer called out urgently, we're detecting mass deployment of biological weapons across 37 human settlements. They're targeting civilian populations with species-specific toxins. Sarah's face went stone cold as the reports flooded in. The aliens weren't just attacking military targets. They were attempting genocide. Children, elderly, non-combatants, entire communities of humans who had never held weapons were being systematically poisoned from orbit. Estimated casualties, she asked, her voice deadly quiet. Current projections show approximately 2 million dead within the first hour, if we don't intervene, Commander Webb reported, his own voice thick with rage. Around the bridge, Sarah could see her crew struggling with the same emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her own carefully maintained composure. They had expected desperate military action, but this was something far worse. The Consortium had chosen to murder innocents rather than face the consequences of their centuries of oppression. Sir Reginald, she called her chief engineer, are the Genesis protocols ready for deployment? The refined British gentleman's voice carried none of its usual understated humor when he replied, all systems are operational, Admiral, though I must note that once we cross this threshold, there will be no possibility of peaceful resolution. Sarah stared at the tactical displays, showing poison clouds drifting through human settlements, watching real-time casualty reports climb with sickening speed. The Consortium had made their choice. Now she would make hers. Execute Genesis protocols across all primary targets, she commanded. Authorization, final judgment. What followed had never been seen in galactic history. The Genesis protocols weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were something far more sophisticated and infinitely more terrifying. For 50 years, humans have been secretly introducing self-replicating nanoscale machines into every alien ecosystem they could access. Machines so small and subtle that no scanner had ever detected them, designed to remain dormant until activated by very specific quantum signatures. Now, as Sarah's command propagated across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds, those machines woke up on the crystalline hegemony's homeworld. The very crystal formations that housed their consciousness began developing structural flaws that would cascade into total collapse within days. The machines didn't attack the crystals directly. They simply altered the harmonic frequencies that held the structures together, using the aliens' own biological processes against them. In Vorthan space, the warrior species found their enhanced metabolism beginning to turn toxic. Humans had spent decades studying Vorthan physiology while serving as gladiators and medical test subjects. The nanomachines now flooding their systems were designed to trigger autoimmune responses that would gradually shut down their enhanced strength and speed, leaving them as vulnerable as any baseline organic species. The Syndicate's mechanical augmentations began experiencing cascade failures as their integrated systems rejected components that had been subtly altered during manufacture. Humans who had worked in their factories for generations had been preparing for this moment, introducing microscopic modifications that would only become apparent when activated by the Genesis signal. Admiral, her science officer reported, "We're receiving biological status reports from across consortium space. All primary targets are showing initial symptoms. Estimated timeline for total systemic collapse is between 72 and 96 hours. Sarah nodded grimly. The Genesis protocols represented humanity's ultimate insurance policy, a species-wide biological weapon that could target any alien physiology humans had been forced to study during their enslavement. It was a product of centuries of medical experiments performed on human subjects, knowledge gained to the most horrific circumstances imaginable, now turned into the perfect instrument of justice. "Open a channel to the Consortium High Council," she ordered. When the connection established, the alien representatives looked noticeably different than they had just hours before. Crystalline hegemony members were beginning to show hairline fractures in their structures. Vorthan warriors appeared sluggish and disoriented. Syndicate diplomats were experiencing visible malfunctions in their cybernetic components. "You use biological weapons against our civilians," Sarah stated, without preamble. "Children, elderly, non-combatants. You chose genocide rather than accountability." High Counselor Vextai's harmonic voice was now clearly distorted by system failures. "Admiral Chun, we demand you cease whatever you have done to our populations immediately. This is a violation of every galactic treaty regarding biological warfare." Sarah's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Treaties? You mean like the ones that guaranteed sapient species wouldn't be enslaved? The ones that prohibited medical experiments on conscious subjects? The ones that banned forced breeding programs and cultural genocide?" She gestured to the tactical displays around her bridge. "Every treaty you're citing now was violated by every species in Consortium when you decided humans weren't really people. For 3 centuries, you treated galactic law as something that applied to everyone except you." The alien council members were now clearly panicking as reports flooded in from across their territories. Their populations were experiencing systematic biological failure, and their medical systems had no idea how to treat conditions they had never encountered. "What do you want?" War Leader Thurick demanded, his enhanced warrior physiology now clearly struggling against the nanomachines in his system. "What are your terms for stopping this?" Sarah stood slowly, her image dominating the council chamber's central display. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 47 billion human souls and 3 centuries of accumulated grievance. "My terms are simple, War Leader. Complete and unconditional surrender of all consortium forces. Immediate withdrawal from all human-occupied territories. Full reparations for damages caused by 3 centuries of enslavement. And the establishment of a new galactic government with humans holding ultimate authority." The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in galactic history, the species that had ruled the known universe were being dictated to by the people they had considered property. "And if we refuse?" High Counselor Vextai asked, though his distorted harmonics suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah's smile was cold and final. "Then you have approximately 60 hours to make peace with whatever deities your species worship. The Genesis protocols are irreversible once fully activated." She paused, letting that sink in before delivering her final statement. "You spent 3 centuries teaching us that might makes right, that the strong can do whatever they wish to the weak. Congratulations, you created perfect students." The surrender came at the 43-hour mark, just as the first alien populations began experiencing total biological collapse. High Counselor Vextai's image flickered with static interference as his cybernetic components continued failing, but his message was clear enough: complete capitulation to all human demands. Admiral Saracen stood in the ruins of what had once been the Consortium High Council chamber on Nexus Prime. The massive space station now served as humanity's first galactic capital, its alien architecture being carefully modified by human engineers who understood its systems better than its original builders. The rehabilitation protocols are proceeding on schedule, Commander Webb reported, his voice carrying a satisfaction that came from seeing justice finally served. All consortium species are responding to the nanomachine treatments. They'll survive, but their enhanced abilities are being systematically reduced to baseline levels. Sarah nodded, watching through the viewport as human vessels established orbital control around the galaxy's former capital. It was a sight that would have been unimaginable just months ago. Earth's children taking their rightful place as the galaxy's new leadership. "Any word from the research teams?" she asked. Dr. Martinez reports that they've successfully reverse-engineered the consciousness transfer technology from the crystalline hegemony. Webb replied, "We can now preserve human minds indefinitely, just as they tried to do to us." The irony is quite poetic. The irony was indeed perfect. Every technology the aliens had developed to better exploit humanity was now being turned to humanity's advantage. The Vorthan Empire's genetic enhancement techniques were being used to improve human physiology. The Syndicate's automation systems were being reprogrammed to serve human needs. Even the crystalline hegemony's consciousness preservation methods would ensure that human knowledge and experience could survive indefinitely. "Admiral," her communications officer announced, "we're receiving the final report from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission." Sarah accepted the data tablet, scrolling through documentation that represented the most comprehensive war crimes investigation in galactic history. Every atrocity, every act of cruelty, every systematic abuse had been cataloged and verified. The evidence was overwhelming and would serve as humanity's justification for everything that followed. "Bring in the first group," she commanded. The chamber's main doors opened to admit a procession of alien dignitaries, their once proud forms now clearly showing the effects of biological reversion. War Leader Thurk of the Vorthan Empire moved with visible difficulty. His enhanced strength reduced to levels that barely exceeded baseline human capability. High Counselor Vexti's cybernetic components flickered intermittently, reducing his processing speed to a fraction of its former capacity. Behind them came representatives from dozens of other species, all bearing the visible marks of humanity's judgment. They were alive, functional, but no longer superior beings they had once considered themselves. They had been reduced to the same level of vulnerability they had once inflicted upon humanity. "You wanted to address the new galactic government," Sarah said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Speak." High Counselor Vexti stepped forward, his metallic features showing expressions that were becoming increasingly difficult to read as the systems continued degrading. "Admiral Chin, we acknowledge our defeat and accept human authority over galactic affairs. But we must ask, what are your intentions for our species?" Sarah studied the assembled representatives, these beings who had once commanded the suffering of billions with casual indifference. Part of her, the part that remembered every horror story passed down through generations of slaves, wanted to see them experience the same fate they had inflicted on humanity. But she was not them. "Your species will continue to exist," she announced, her words carrying across the chamber and to billions of alien civilians listening throughout the galaxy. "You will live, work, and govern your own affairs within parameters established by human oversight. You will rebuild your civilizations according to principles of equality and justice that you clearly never understood." She stood, moving to the massive viewport that showed the galaxy's new reality. Human ships patrolling space lanes that had once carried slave transports. Human colonies being established on worlds that had once been alien strongholds. "But you will never again hold authority over another sapient species," she continued. "Your military capabilities have been permanently reduced. Your genetic enhancements have been neutralized. Your advanced technologies are now under human control. You wanted to prove that might makes right. Congratulations, you succeeded. Now live with the consequences." War Leader Thurk's voice was barely recognizable without his enhanced vocal cords. "And what of justice for your own actions? The biological weapons, the systematic subjugation of our populations. Are these not the same crimes you accuse us of committing?" Sarah turned back to face the assembled aliens, her expression showing no trace of remorse or uncertainty. "The difference, War Leader, is that we are offering you survival. For 3 centuries, your species practiced systematic genocide against humanity. You destroyed our cultures, murdered our children, conducted medical experiments on conscious subjects, and treated us as disposable resources. You had every opportunity to show mercy, to demonstrate the higher values you claim to possess. She gestured to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's findings displayed on the chamber screens. Instead, you industrialized cruelty. You turned suffering into profit. You created an entire economic system based on the systematic dehumanization of 47 billion souls. When we offered you the chance to surrender with dignity, you chose to deploy biological weapons against our civilian populations. The silence that followed was profound. Every alien in the chamber understood that they were experiencing something unprecedented, being held accountable by a species they considered inferior. Your species will live, Sarah concluded, but you will live as equals in a galaxy where such equality is enforced by people who understand exactly what happens when it's absent. You will rebuild your civilizations under human guidance. And perhaps over the next few centuries, you will learn what we tried to teach you with words before we were forced to teach you with force. She moved toward the chamber's exit, her senior staff falling into formation around her. The age of consortium dominance is over, she announced to the assembled aliens. The age of human justice has begun. I suggest you learn to be worthy of the mercy we are showing you. As the doors closed behind the human delegation, the former masters of the galaxy were left to contemplate their new reality. For the first time in their species' histories, they would have to live with the consequences of their actions, guided by the very people they had once enslaved. Humanity had not just won their freedom. They had claimed their rightful place as the galaxy's conscience, ensuring that the horrors of the past 3 centuries would never be repeated. The universe had learned, too late, why humans should never have been enslaved in the first place. Justice, it turned out, was a very human concept, and now the galaxy would learn to live by human rules.